I think the Ku Klux Klan, I think if we're using that as an example, I
Wait,
think
we
today
can
they're
wait. We
less.
can wait one last second. They can just follow your advice when it comes to leaving, right? They can just go back to Africa, and you're a model, right?
That I don't believe that. I don't believe that
That's what
country.
you said about
I think the
Ukrainians. You said Ukrainians should just leave. So if black
but
people are
yeah, because
threatened by
this
the
country
Klan,
is
they
in
should
a.
just go to Africa.
I don't agree with Antifa, but there's always going to be people like that who are just going to respond to violence no matter what. Like they're vigilantes; they don't care. There's going to be people like Kyle Rittenhouse. I mean, I don't like any of these people, but there's going to be people like that regardless. And I'm sure some people would be passionate enough to want to stop these people.
But not if they live by your principles.
Well, the truth of pacifism is like it
So
doesn't
the thing
matter.
about
Like,
pacifism, it seems, is that it only works if other people aren't pacifists, and that's why it doesn't make any sense. I'd just be clear. I'd steal if I got an opportunity. I'd steal everything you own. I would turn to you and say, "Give me your shoes," and I would take whatever out of your pocket. I would take everything, your banknote, everything. I'd take your heirlooms and I'd throw it into the sewers. Okay?
just for full disclosure, I had some really personal news, like really bad news, like 15 minutes ago, and my Wi-Fi connection isn't working the best. So if there's issues during the stream, that's why. But besides that, I'm good to go.
If you had like
So
really personal, like tragic, like whatever, like you can go. Like you don't need to. Like if you
no,
don't
no,
want to.
no, it's fine. It's there's no reason for me not to be here. It's just like if I'm like feeling off today, that's why. But it's nothing to do with you. Like I promise I'll be fine, and I don't want it to be like a sympathy party. So
Okay, sure. So I saw you had a conversation with Destiny about the consent stuff, huh?
Yeah, you saw that. What'd you think of it? I have a lot to say about that.
I don't really have much to say about it. I think I've already said everything I thought about it to you. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I disagreed with you, obviously.
that makes sense. Basically, I don't know, I want to say this. I was in this very weird conversation where it's like I've had so many conversations about this before that like my viewpoint shifted from the time I made that tweet. But when I had that conversation, the conversation was basically about the tweet. And it was weird because I felt like I was in a different place, but I had to defend the position that like I was originally arguing against all that time ago. And every time I tried to drift the conversation or make it more nuanced, go in a different direction, I felt like Destiny kind of like shot that down. And so we were stuck on this one question, and it was like I was put in a really weird spot. It's like no matter what I did, I was gonna get hate either for like, oh, you're wasting everyone's time. Why are you claiming to have this position when it's like you're, or the other side of the coin being that like, why am I like defending a position where you said that you changed your mind on it? It was a very weird conversation for me. I rewatched it. It wasn't as bad as I thought, but I could have done better. People said I didn't prepare, but I had like a whole document written down for it.
And
So
you have a I would say societally you have a weird position when it comes to not not like stabbing or shooting your rapists, right? So
I do.
so if you have if you have a weird position, you're gonna have weird conversations, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, I just expected it to like we were so stuck on one place, and I wanted to expand the conversation, and I was never able to do so. I had so many things I wanted to cover, and I just wasn't able to. It's very different from what I was expecting. That was the first time this ever really happened to me with mine. So usually I can just like have a chill conversation, and it can drift off and become more interesting. He just wasn't interested in that.
Okay,
So
well
that happens.
let's talk about why you're here today then. So I put out a tweet
Yes.
recently about a article from Russia Today that is talking about a new law targeting LGBT propaganda, which would propose fines for promoting non-traditional sexual relations that could exceed $160,000. Basically, if you're like being gay is okay publicly, you can get fines of $160,000. I responded to this
Yeah.
by saying, imagine being so afraid of all your men turning gay that you will fine people as much as $160,000 to stop them from finding men cute. Somebody responded to this by adding you, saying, is Russia taking over really that bad? And then you responded, spoiler alert, it's not, in response to them taking over Ukraine, that it wouldn't be that bad. That is basically what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why people would think that that's a pretty yikesy tweet. I would say that. Can you hear me, by the way? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So the first thing I want to say to that is like I don't agree with the original like law that Russia has. I think fining people $160,000 for saying actually being gay is okay. Obviously, I don't agree with that. I guess the solution is like you can still be gay in private, kind of like the what "Don't Say Gay" or whatever that thing was, the homosexual thing in the early 2000s with the military stuff. It'd be like that. I don't think it's like the end all be all, but it's pretty bad. I don't agree with it at all. But I would say like if Russia takes over Ukraine, I don't think it's going to be that terrible. To be honest, like I think it's better than people dying. I mean that's always going to be my position on here. It's like yeah, this sucks, but I'd rather like people be alive and suffer through that than people be dead because of a war.
Um, so well, the first thing is you're saying it wouldn't. You said it wouldn't be bad for them to take over. Basically, that's what you're saying. This person says is Russia taking over that bad, and you say no. So this is separate from whether or not it would be worse than the people dying. You're just saying it wouldn't be bad if the Russians took over Ukraine.
I don't think it'd be particularly awful.
Burns is an immoral,
You
morally
do you really
corrupt,
hold that
bankrupt
position?
man.
I think it would suck for some people. I think the people in the LGBT communities, like I said, should be able to leave while they can. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not letting them, which sucks. But yeah, I mean, if they let them leave, and people felt like they had their opportunity to get out, and like the people who are gay and trans can leave the country before they transition, like there's a way to make things work.
Okay, so to be clear, the problem okay, so we can go through like an assortment of things that would make Russian occupation of Ukrainian lands terrible. We could talk about the historical precedent of Russia's banning the Ukrainian language, suppressing the Ukrainian literature, which is showing its face right now with the destruction of Ukrainian children's books and other literature in locations like Mariupol. Or we can talk about the massacres of Bucha, where people's hands were tied behind their backs and they were executed. We can talk about how Russian POWs, footage was just released of Chechen soldiers castrating um, POWs, Ukrainian POWs, showing that they obviously are willing to torture and maim and brutalize those who even surrender to them. Surrendering to the Russians will not stop violence against you. You will still be tortured. You will still be killed. Aiden, who was a guy who was part of like a British expat who's in Ukraine, was also beaten in Russian custody, very obviously from the bruise that he got when he was paraded around. When they annexed, I mean, I don't want to like pile this on, like the Tartar
Okay.
activists in Crimea that ended up dead in rivers, or the laws in Russia that are against freedom of speech when it comes to, you can't even call this a war, like the type of laws that would be local and present there, or the activists and politicians that are just disappearing. What would happen to opposition activists? The reports of kill lists, like Russian occupation would not be a gentle process, as we've already seen from what they've done in the south or in locations like Bucha, where they've tortured people in basements for hours on end.
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely some awful stuff that Russia's doing, right? I'm glad I live in the U.S. and not there, not gonna lie. But at the same time, like, do you genuinely think like that the Russians want to kill every single Ukrainian? Do you think that they're planning a Ukrainian genocide? Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, there's like a few. I feel like the same way that people talk about Israel. Like, yeah, there's like a few violent acts here and there that's like obviously awful, but I don't think the government is like trying to enact mass violence on the population. There's just like a few events that probably should be taken care of better, where like they shouldn't happen. Um, I don't know necessarily that this means that like the whole country of Russia is just like. I think most people in Russia are just like in denial. I feel like most Russian citizens probably just don't know the truth. They've been fed this propaganda. They probably don't believe the war is existing, and they probably trust Putin. I don't think that they're evil. That they just like hate Ukraine. Obviously, I think Putin's spreading lies. I think he's trying to downplay this whole thing. But at the same time, I don't think he genuinely wants to enact mass violence on the Ukrainian people. I think he just wants to reclaim the land and territory. I don't believe that he's like this evil dictator. Like he has a lot of fucking problems, and believe me, he's not a good person. I wouldn't go necessarily that far.
I mean, I could talk about like the targeting of Ukrainian history and language, or I could talk about the mass deportations, the forced mass deportations of millions of Ukrainians to Russian territory, even if they didn't want to go, the filtration camps that the Russians are putting Ukrainians through, whether or not it meets the legal definition of genocide, which the New Lines actually produced a report talking about how there is the possibility of genocide happening in Ukraine, definitely when it comes to mass deportations, the sieges that have denied people food, and the targeting of critical infrastructure that is needed to live in Ukraine. When you talk about I would say, like, even if it currently doesn't meet the definition of genocide, the mass violence is most certainly occurring. When we looked at Mariupol, they are using the tactic of taking the cities that they are sieging and just flattening them like they're a car park. And the territory that they do occupy, a lot of times terrible war crimes take place, like the castration of POWs or the execution of civilians, which happened in Bucha. So, I mean, yeah, I do think mass violence is taking place, absolutely, against the civilian population as well, and prisoners of war.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean, obviously, like, I'm a pacifist on all fronts, and that includes Russia. I think that Russia shouldn't have started the war. I think Putin, in his mind, he just wants to reclaim the territory. I'm sympathetic to that argument. I
Shouldn't
just
be,
think,
but
though, that does not that doesn't justify the awful, like, mass violence that he's committed. He definitely started this war, and the only thing that I'd say, though, is, like, with something like that, like, you're not going to be able to just get him to stop. So I feel like the only way to stop is to stop fighting and just, like, let him, have a little bit of what he wants.
why are
I
you
don't think that's so
so
terrible.
fucking stupid?
Why do you think I'm stupid? It's just, like,
You're smiling right now, right? You know what you're saying is fucking stupid, okay? You know what you're saying is stupid. And it's like you do this constantly. You'll just choose the most retarded one brain cell arguments you can possibly conjure up, and you'll say them knowing it's going to piss people off. If you could, you would have said the Jews should have just submitted harder during the Holocaust. This
no, actually.
this pacifist nonsense is stupid. And you know it's stupid. It leads to more people getting raped. It leads to more people getting war crimed. It leads to more people getting castrated. It leads to more people getting shot. When you don't resist, that doesn't make bullies stop. It just means that they'll just bully you harder now that they've got the opportunity to. The countries that submitted, like Denmark, while they had to deal with less violence from Nazi Germany, they still targeted the Jews, and they still tried to genocide the Jews of Denmark. The only reason they didn't get genocided was because those Jews fled. Right? If you surrendered to the Nazis,
Exactly what I said.
No. You don't understand.
Corrupt,
They still
bankrupt
tried
man.
to genocide the Danish Jews. Their submission didn't stop it. So the bad things Russia would do with the execution of political opponents, right? That would still happen in Ukraine. The suppression of Ukrainian identity, that would still happen. The mass annexation of territory, the denial of a national identity. I mean, Dmitry Medvedev clearly said that Ukraineness is a mental disease, right? The denial of Ukraine as a nation state and their own history and their own identity. This would still happen. The only difference is bombs would stop being dropped and that opportunity they
Which
have
is
now to
good.
resist it. But it means that instead of the Russian soldiers would have direct access to brutalize the populations all across Ukraine, what would stop Bucha from happening in Lviv or from happening in Kiev or Odessa?
I think if you have a population that's, like, more pro-Russian in Ukraine, I think they're gonna be, like, less targeting the Ukrainians. It's like, oh, that shouldn't be the solution. Okay, maybe it shouldn't, but what do you think is better? Like, having a war where a bunch of people die?
Absolutely,
Like,
absolutely, that's better. Because the thing is, okay, let me ask you a question, because I'm gonna get to the root of this pacifism. Let's say that you had a choice between two things. One was you are consistently having your skin burnt off and your eyes peeled out and, like, torn out, and you're being raped for forever, or you die. What option would you choose?
I mean, it's not a realistic scenario. I think I'd probably choose, like, the torture. Although at some point I probably just want it to stop. But that's not, like, a cry for, like, wanting to die. It's just a cry for, like, wanting the pain to stop. I think probably at some point when you're being tortured like that, you just are just like, fuck it. Like, you just don't care anymore. But, like, I don't know. I mean, it's not a realistic
This is my
scenario,
question,
but
because
maybe.
the thing is, to you, there is nothing that another human being could ever do that would justify violence, and that is what pacifism is. And so you will allow rape,
Yeah.
you will allow murder, you will allow genocide, you allow everything to happen because you don't want to get your hands dirty because you're a coward.
Well, I tend to think that these solutions can resolve peacefully, or at
If
least
your
somewhat get
peacefully is
better.
no. But you know that this wouldn't be resolved peacefully. It would just be resolved with like mass killings and but less bombs. It would just be mass killings
I
instead, and then you get to be living in servitude to the Russian state in the denial of your identity for the next 300 years until maybe one day a benevolent Russian leader takes over and the Ukrainians have to peacefully resist, because if they ever take out a gun, oh, woe is me, woe is me.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing. I'm consistent. Like, I don't like the way the history textbooks talk about the Civil War, right? Like,
You tell me the
so
peaceful
many
solution to rape.
freaking people, so many people, innocent people died, and it's like, I personally think in that situation, we could have waited a few more decades, and these resolutions should have been resolved. I think in these wars, you have a bunch of millions of people dying needlessly, and people are just way too okay with that. And I feel like that hasn't been challenged. If it's
What's the
challenged, nobody
peaceful
takes it
solution to
seriously.
rape?
The peaceful solution to rape, to not kill the rapist, which is what happens in the vast majority of rapes.
No,
Like, I
no,
think
you didn't
most
listen.
rape
You didn't
victims,
listen.
most rape victims manage to like
How
not
do you
kill the rapist.
peacefully stop a rapist? I want to know. I want to know how you peacefully stop a rapist. That means no threats of violence, no guns, no knives, no. How do you peacefully stop the rapist? I would like to know, without the threat of violence, without violence from the state. How do you peacefully stop them? What therapy
Well,
do you do
I don't
live
think that
while the rape is
is.
happening to make them stop?
There's probably not that much you can physically do, but I just feel like rape is like not as bad as murder, so it's like not the worst thing. I feel like you can try using like non-violent methods. Like, I guess, like, I don't even like this. I don't even think that people should have them. But I mean, I guess like you could use like a mace or a pepper spray or whatever, or you could just try to like leave the situation if you
paint the
can.
picture.
Not always possible, but a lot of times it is.
Let's paint the society that you intend to create.
Prevention
The
is
society
always good.
that you would live in. If I walk to work and I get raped, I just gotta lay there and take it. If someone is gonna come up to me and assault me, I just gotta basically lay there and take it. If I fight back, might hit him, might kill him, if I knock him out or something. If my nation gets invaded and my people genocided, I just gotta sit there and take it. If someone breaks into my home, steals all my shit, rapes me, my wife, and my child, I just gotta stand there and do nothing. The society that you're painting is one of the worst hellscapes I could possibly imagine. When you've created this pacifist delusion that'll just lead to the worst people possible ruling the world, and then guess what? There's gonna be less peace, because the only thing that is stopping the violent thugs like Vladimir Putin from taking over and brutalizing everyone is the threat of violence.
Immoral, morally corrupt.
Hold on, when it comes to taking Ukraine, instead of doing that $40 billion spending on Ukrainians while we're facing record inflation in the United States, I think that's where the money should be going. I think instead, if we're going to use that money, why don't we just get a shuttle service? Be like, hey, any Ukrainian who wants to leave the country, leave in our buses. We'll take you to a safe space in the EU or somewhere in the United States. We'll house you if you want to leave the country. Vladimir Putin's going to take over, but we're going to have your back if you want. If you don't want to be under his control,
stupid, because you don't believe in violence at all. So if
lives are saved,
you don't know, no lives are not saved, because you don't believe in peace at all. You don't believe in violence at all. So that means if Vladimir Putin tomorrow invaded California, your solution is surrender. And that means that they just would face the same fate anyway if they came to America, because Putin could just take over any country he wants, and your solution will always be, I don't want to shoot, and therefore he can literally rule all of Europe. He could rule America. He could rule any country that your policies would take over in.
Morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
I'll tell you what, I don't think that Putin will ever take the California.
Okay,
and
let me ask you a
part of that,
question. If China and Putin invade America, do you think Americans should fight back?
Burns is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
I mean, what do you mean by fight back?
You
Like,
know
do you want us
exactly
to
what I
drop
mean,
like
and your
more
answer is gonna be
Hiroshima and
edgy, and it's gonna be
Nagasaki's?
no. They should surrender and allow
Burns
Putin and
is an
China to take over
immoral,
and destroy
morally
democracy
corrupt,
and everything
bankrupt man.
generation after generation have sacrificed to try to establish and create, including people like Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King. Give it all up because I'm a pussy and I'm a
Burns is
coward.
an
Get the
immoral,
fuck out of here!
morally
Come on.
corrupt,
I mean,
bankrupt man.
like, I'd like the U.S. to say a thing, but I think that's why we put so much work into, I think, security theater or the illusion of protection. And I feel like the illusion, like, basically
Burns is
prevents
an
them from attacking
immoral,
us because we
morally
got so many,
corrupt,
like,
The threat
bankrupt
of
nukes. But
violence
I don't think.
only matters if you're willing to back it up with actual violence. So if the Russians every single time they pushed, we just said and backed up, they'd eventually figure out that there's no actual violence there, and then they just steamroll everything.
No, but the way I think of it is like, well, think about this, right? The United States has a bunch of nukes, but we're never going to drop them. The reason we have these nukes is I think the same reason why most people have guns in their house, because they want people to think, hey, I could use this and I might, so don't mess with me. And the idea is, well, you're just never going to use them because everybody knows the consequence of using them is so dire that they should never be touched. But the idea is just simply having them there will prevent an attack because they're too fearful of having these devices used.
But then if they
So
actually pull the trigger, you don't want to respond, meaning that every single time the Russians push, you back off. And eventually they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out eventually. The Russians aren't stupid. They're going to figure it out that you have no backbone. You're not willing to defend yourself because you're a pacifist. And then they'll steamroll because nobody's going to resist them. And then everybody that opposes them will either get shot and thrown in a river, or like they'll have all the POWs castrated, or whatever's going to happens. Like, what do you mean? Like, do you think that if Putin knew that there was going to be no resistance from the world if he continued, that he wouldn't go into Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Hungary, any of these locations? Moldova?
I think he absolutely would. He would, absolutely. No doubt. Yeah. Which is why I think we put up a front of acting like we're going to do it. And I think we try to scare him.
You keep saying it, but once he figures out that it's all an illusion, which eventually happens, it will happen if you don't have actually anything to back it up. That eventually happens all the time. There's never been a country that just had the illusion for forever and then stayed stable and never got invaded. Eventually, the bubble gets popped. You can only have an illusion for so long. Eventually, the mirror is going to fall down. And when it does, you're going to have nothing to back it up. And then we're fucked.
I mean, at that point, it's possible. I would just hope that we have and this is the thing. I would hope that we have enough systems in place to make sure that we're fine. I think if he rebuilds the USSR, it's like gonna suck for some people, but it's like, okay, whatever.
It's just the foreigners,
I just don't think
right?
It's what?
Just the foreigners, right? Just like, who cares?
My hope would be that the people who want to be part of Russia would be part of Russia, and the people who don't would have a chance to leave. Like, at some point,
do you think it's that simple? Okay, Rose, let me ask you a question. Can you send me your address?
I don't really feel comfortable doing that.
Okay. Because, Rose, if I had your address, I could go to your home, knock on the door and say, I'm threatening you, and then I could just take everything and leave, right? But if you call the cops, Rose, they could possibly shoot me because they would use the threat of violence. So what you're advertising to the world is that your house is perfect for being burgled, correct?
Not true. I would still call the cops, and if the cops did it, that would not be my fault. So
that would be your fault because you called them. You chose to use the state violence. You got violence from the state, and they did it for you. You're taking somebody. Wait, no. You know cops have guns in the United States. You said you don't like guns. You don't even think people should have guns. You're taking people with guns to pursue me. And if I run or if I do something that scares the cop, there's a chance he shoots me and I'm dead. And you just played a role in my death.
Which would be awful. And I wouldn't want that to happen.
So you wouldn't call the cops.
With the police.
And to be morally consistent, you would have to not call the cops if I stole all your stuff.
Hold on. I think that there's a big problem. My thing is I would call the cops after the situation is over. There would be security footage of the whole event taking place. They'd be able to track the person down, and they'd be able to safely capture the person.
What do you mean safely capture? Do you know how many times the cops say they're going to safely capture someone and then they end up dead?
Yeah, because
Look,
there's a
look at
problem
the
with our
George Floyd
relationship that
situation,
needs
for
to be
example.
fixed.
That was a situation where somebody could have easily been safely captured, right? But instead, he got choked out and murdered, right? So the idea that the cops are going to be this peaceful entity that are going to come up and safely capture me is nonsense. There's a decent chance that they could kill me, and you would be playing a role in that. And the thing is, if the idea is you called somebody else to do it, therefore you're still a pacifist, Putin didn't personally go into Ukraine and kill all the Ukrainians. It was the Russian military, which he ordered to do it, that went did it. That doesn't make Putin a pacifist.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is the thing. Do you want me to give my address out and just be like, oh, if something happens, like, I'm confident enough in those security measures? Like, is that what you fucking want from me?
What I want you to
Like,
what I want you to realize is that I want you to live to your own standards, the standards you're applying to Ukrainians. If you're going to say for Ukrainians that they can't resist anything or
Burns
use
is
violence in any way,
immoral,
you got to hold
morally
that standard for
corrupt,
yourself too.
bankrupt
If
man.
someone goes up to you and robs you and takes all your stuff, you just got to sit there, take it. Don't call the cops because the cops
that's
could
what
kill
I
them.
would. That's what I would do, but
No,
I
it
would
isn't.
call the
You
cops.
liar.
I would call the cops. I would call the cops after the situation.
No, that doesn't change it. You know that doesn't change it because the cops would still have guns and they could still kill me if they found out that I stole. What if I resisted arrest and I reach into my pocket to grab my wallet? They think it's a gun and I'm blown away. Then you killed me. You're no longer a pacifist.
That's why I believe in prison reform and why I advocate so hard for the police to be held accountable to higher standards to stop them from doing things like that. I think there's a
Policing will
huge
never work
with
if
our
they don't have the threat of violence, because then violent people will just be like, okay, I'll just kill the cop then, or I'll just, like, if I know the cop's not gonna kill me, I'm just gonna kill the cop, right?
I feel like this is just propaganda. Like, this is just.
What do you mean it's propaganda? I'm literally
Like,
just describing.
just
Cops only function if they have the threat of violence. The state, as an entity, will only be able to enforce laws if at some point it has a violent threat behind it, because if it doesn't, then people who are more violent than the state can rise up and take it on, like gangs, mafias, warlords, and they can take over the country.
Okay, maybe there's a case to be made that, like, maybe the cops need to have it as a last case scenario for protection. The problem is that that's not how the cops view it now. They just shoot first and ask questions later.
If there's a situation where the cop's life is threatened or the life of somebody else is threatened, then they should use force to possibly kill or maim the person who is threatening people's lives. In that situation, the cops should use force.
If that person's life is, like, attacked and there's absolutely no nuance whatsoever, if they're threatening that person's life, there's literally a gun to that person's head, no nuance whatsoever, then yeah. The problem is that, like, the police, they don't think of it that way at all. They're like, oh, this person refused to raise their hands, shoot. Oh, this person is walking down the street suspiciously, shoot. This person might have a weapon, but we don't know. Oh, they don't have a weapon. Oh, no. Like, they all these times they.
So you wouldn't call the cops on me because they could possibly kill me, correct? So if I went and I robbed you, you would never call the cops on me.
I would feel incredibly guilty, but I'd still call the cops. Like, that's
you wouldn't live by your own principles. Why should Ukrainians live by your principles if you won't even live by them?
But I do. That's the thing.
You'll call the cops, which can go kill me. The cops could kill me.
I advocate all the time for the cops to be less violent. If I had the control to do that,
doesn't change it. If what is it? What do you mean? If you can advocate for the cops to be less violent, but if you call the cops, that doesn't magically make them less violent. If they go and kill me, and you know the cops could kill me, then you're still using violence against me.
Well, I wouldn't be the one committing violence, and I would.
That doesn't matter. Putin isn't the one committing violence directly. He's not the one going out shooting Ukrainians. He ordered other people to do it. Like, you would order the cop to go pursue me. You're using the violence of the state in replacement for you getting your stuff yourself and using violence. You're just moving it to cops because it makes you feel better. The state makes you feel better.
I would tell them very specifically, please don't use any violence. Please use peaceful measures and hope that they listen to that. And I can feel comfortable.
And that's stupid. That's not going to change anything. Why would you telling a cop be nice? What's that going to change?
I would sleep much better at night knowing that I did everything in my power.
I don't care if you sleep better or not. I care about you being consistent. If you're gonna basically say a whole nation state should give up its sovereignty, freedom, and have people shot or castrated to preserve this illusion of peace, right? Just so you can feel better. Doesn't matter to me. I don't care if it makes you feel better. Live consistently. If you're gonna hold the standard to a nation at war, then the least you can do is hold that station that same standard for you. When it comes to somebody stealing your stuff, it's not even your life that is a threat. For the Ukrainians, their life is a threat.
You know what? If somebody stole my stuff, maybe it's not that big of a deal. It'd just be depending on what they stole. It probably, if they stole a fucking TV, I'd just be like, there, you have a free TV.
I'd steal everything. I'd just be clear. I'd steal, if I got an opportunity, I'd steal everything you own. I would turn to you and say, give me your shoes. And I would take whatever out of your pocket. I would take everything, your banknote, everything. I'd take your heirlooms and I'd throw it into the sewers, okay? And you're just gonna have to live with it because you can't, because violence is bad.
I don't know why you would do that, but I'd probably just buy new shoes and, invest in better security.
What you gonna buy shoes with? I took all your money.
I'll find a way to get the money.
Okay, and every time you get money, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna take it again. I'm gonna be the pillaging Mongol coming back.
I mean, this is
I'm gonna learn throat singing. I'm gonna get on horseback and a bow and arrow. I'm gonna come back. Oy, oy. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna take all your stuff. I'm gonna leave again. Every time. Because you don't want to use the threat of violence.
Yeah, because I don't think it's like, I'd rather have my stuff stolen than risk violence. Like, yeah.
So now you are committing that you would not call the cops if I came and stole everything you owned as many times as I wanted.
I mean, I'd probably I'd probably move somewhere else to feel safer. I'd probably go to a different.
You don't think I would have? You don't think I'll find it? I'll call my fellow.
Are you gonna hire?
I'll call Mr. Hun, Mr. Attila the Hun, and I'll track you. And I'm gonna steal. Look, at some point you're gonna get frustrated. You're gonna call the cops because I'm stealing all your stuff.
If you're that committed, go just fucking have it. Like if you're that committed to doing it. Like, bravo. Like, geez. But I don't like the idea that, a bunch of people are watching, and I don't want anyone to get that idea.
Are you committing, to be clear, before you said you'd call the cops, so now you wouldn't call the cops, because you realize the cops could kill me, therefore killing me over your stuff.
I guess so. I mean, I'd have to know more specifics about the case. Like, if someone was literally just walking in and, not causing any harm, not being threatening whatsoever, and just wanted my stuff, I'd be like, okay.
I would let everything on fire, to be clear. I'd come and I'd light in flame arrows. I would start with the flame arrows and come in.
Yeah, then I'd call the cops. I'm sorry. That you're at putting people at risk at that point, and at that point.
So now that I'm possibly putting people at risk, now you have to put me at risk as well. Therefore, putting more people at risk. Pacifism.
It's a sad thing. It really is.
This is sad because this scenario, this society you've drawn up is weak and will just get more people killed than you intended to save, because people are just gonna all basically sign a suicide pact that the first person that comes around that is violent can just kill everyone. Or steal from everybody and make everybody's lives miserable.
I don't know. I feel like it's much more better to address I don't think that people are inherently evil. I think we address the root problems of why people do what they do, and you'd be able to figure out a way to get them to stop. I'm sure we don't have all the answers yet,
So you would try therapy with the raiding Genghis Khan, Dylan Khan.
I would see what resources we could do, mandatory, what is it? What are those
mandatory?
classes?
Are you telling about by force? So the threat of violence again? No. Back it up. No mandatory.
It's not the threat of violence.
Maybe optional. Maybe optional therapy. You
know how you're required to vote, but if you don't vote, there's not going to be people at your house threatening you. It's that.
But if I'm required to vote and they're like, Dylan, you need to vote, and I'm like, no, and then I throat sing my way out of the room. Okay, then, you need to back something. Eventually, the threat of violence has to be brought. The thing about that voting thing is, if you don't pay the fine, then they're gonna come to your house and be like, you got to pay the fine, or we're gonna arrest you.
No, I don't believe in that. I don't
well, then what's the point of the fine? Nobody's gonna pay fines or taxes if the threat of violence isn't there. How are you gonna get anybody to pay taxes if there's no threat of violence?
I think people are honest. I've encountered a lot of people who are like, I think people assume the worst out of humanity, and I don't. I've seen people like, oh, they forgot to pay like their bill at one time, then the next time they pay double. It's like, I'm so sorry, I forgot this. It's like there's nothing really going to happen to them if they don't do it. I just think they have like a guilty conscience. I think a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, want to do the right thing. And I feel like people underestimate this. Like, I don't think that there's really truly evil people out there.
If people can opt out of taxes, I'm pretty sure that a majority of people would.
I guess so. A lot of people don't like taxes. I'd say the more problem with that, though, is it like, let's say that people were like well fed and all of that, then I think there'd be like less of a concern. Like, I know rich people avoid taxes too. But like when it comes to a lot of like poor people, I feel like those people feel particularly targeted because those taxes are like a significant portion of their income and they're barely surviving. I feel like
you don't think billionaires
like
wouldn't pay taxes? That they would be like, why would I pay taxes? I got all this money. I can make everything I want for myself. And they don't pay taxes.
Well, they get away with it anyway. I mean, if they
but
already
the
get away
solution to
with
that
it,
isn't making it easier to get away with it, Rose.
I think it'd be a more societal like pressure, not like with the force. I think you can pressure people without like violence and stuff. Like, what if these people were like heavily pressured by the people around them? They're like socially shunned if they like didn't, pay their taxes, and they got like a lot of shit on it by the media. I mean, you see billionaires donate to charity all the time.
So
why
you
do they
think
do that?
we could just shame them into paying taxes?
Probably. I mean, not everybody, but I think it'd be more effective than people would think. I mean,
okay, so you
I'm
really
not
let's
saying
move
it's
off
a
of
perfect
this.
solution.
Let's
It's
move off
not.
the fact that you would create the most dystopian hellscape as a society possible, where you can't do anything to stand up for yourself. And back to Ukraine, you said that if somebody is a risk to others, a threat to you, if I shot some fire arrows into your home, you throat singing the whole time, like, give me all your stuff. Now that I'm risking people's lives, now it's different. Russia is risking a lot of people's lives. So why would it not be moral for the Ukrainians to shoot at the people risking all of their lives, putting everybody's lives at risk by invading?
I think the Ukrainians are like, they're putting more harm into the world. I mean, when you look at the battlefield, it's not like one side good and one side bad. It is objectively both sides are killing the other side. And when it comes to that point, there's no good guys or bad guys anymore. There's no good guys in the war.
Would you say that about any war ever?
Yeah, I mean,
so during World War II, during
D-Day,
what would your commentary would be? There's just a lot of people killing people here. There's no other political implications of who I would support or not support in this war. Just a lot of people killing and dying. We should negotiate with Hitler.
See, with the Nazis, it's like they were particularly bad because the
Russians are being particularly bad right now in Ukraine. I mean, they're not the Nazis, but they're being particularly bad.
They are. I don't believe that they're causing a genocide. Maybe they're trying to remove cultural and historical things, which kind of sucks, but that's not the same as killing people. I mean, with the Nazis and stuff...
Be clear, they are killing people. You can't say that they are literally killing people. You can't say they're not killing people. That is the one thing I am absolutely positive they are doing.
Well, then that sucks. I mean, I don't know what to do about that. I mean, the fact that Ukraine is fighting Russia isn't leading to them killing less people. I'd argue it's leading to them killing more people, but, Do you think that ever since the Ukrainians attacked Russia, that there's less Russians killing people?
Do I think say that again?
Do you think that ever since the Ukrainians decided to attack Russia, that Russia decided to kill less people because of that?
I think that the Ukrainians fighting back made it so the Russians killed... I would say would make it so the Russians killed less people in other parts of the country if Bucha is to be repeated. Now, there is a possibility that less people died because they had to use less bombs and stuff like that. But that would be at the sacrifice of things like liberty, freedom of speech, independence, sovereignty, freedom of protest, you know, like a lot of like civil liberties, you know, like a lot of things people want to live and prosper, and that Ukrainians value. And at the end of the day, it is up to Ukrainians to decide what they're going to pit their life for, right? I think ultimately everybody has a dominion over their own life. And if so, the Ukrainians decide that they're willing to risk their lives for their freedom, that's up to them and not up to your moral grandstanding, really.
Okay, well, I would say this, like, let's say hypothetically that, like, okay, a few less Ukrainian people are going to die because of this war, but a bunch more Russian people are going to die. I would say then, like, why do we believe that the Russian lives are less valuable than the Ukrainian lives? Because this isn't
because
Putin
they're
that's
the
dying.
invader. Because they've
Hold
made a
on,
moral decision that made their lives worthless, and to a
Can
certain
I-
point.
Can I
Absolutely.
explain this though? Because Putin's sitting in his nice little throne. He's fine. He's not the one that's going to feel the consequence of this. These Russians are innocent people who are basically victims of propaganda. They're just as much as a victim as anybody else. They're being
So were
fed
the
these lies
Nazis.
by the Russian
But at the end of
government.
the day, they have the control over their bodies, and they are using their bodies to reap destruction upon the land. And so this is the consequences of their own actions. If they
I
can,
don't
they
think
can
it is.
surrender if they want.
I don't think it is their own actions. I don't.
It literally,
I don't,
you're who's pulling the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that to an extent, and I feel the same way about American soldiers. Like, I think they're all brainwashed by their country to do these awful things. And it's like, I don't believe that, they should have to suffer as well. I mean, this is just more innocent people dying, and I don't think it matters what country they're from. And I think it's disgusting that a lot of people oftentimes are okay with murdering other people just because of the country that they're born in.
Okay.
And I don't see this just from the Russians. I
You
see this
sound
from
like the
Ukrainians
defense
too.
for the German Nazis during the Second World War. Well, at the end of the day, they were just following orders. Like, it really wasn't in their control if whether or not. Like, you sound. Like, come on, let's be for real. Like, at some point, we have to give a person, like, say that this is you. You decided to follow the orders. You decided to do the thing. It's your fault.
Hold on. Let me say this. The people, I think all the Russians and the Ukrainians in the war killing people are all evil pieces of shit. I absolutely believe they all are.
And that's
I believe
stupid.
that every American soldier, all veterans are. Like, I 100% believe that. Like, anyone who's, like, killed somebody in a war is a terrible person, and I don't think they can be forgiven for that, right? But, like, that's the thing. I believe that regardless of what side you're fighting for. You know what I'm saying?
Like, I sadly do know what you're saying.
And I think that's why they have...
This is stupid. You're just being a lolcow, purposefully.
I don't think being a pacifist is being a lolcow. I think
being a pacifist inherently is being a lolcow because it's a stupid position. Because being a pacifist just, in a lot of cases, just leads to more death. Because like bullies will just be able to take over. If we were all pacifists in the United States, it would take like 10 days before like the Bloods and Crips ran the whole country.
I don't know if they do. Like, they already have a lot.
Right. The mafia would run New York. That'd be like the one difference.
I don't think things would drastically change. I really don't. I feel like human behavior is pretty natural. And I feel like even if all laws were legal, like people could just do whatever they want, I think the vast majority of people wouldn't do terrible things.
Oh, okay. Let's say 90% of people just continue to follow the law for no inherent benefit. That still means 10% of people are going to be terribly violent and mean. If only 1% of people, that's millions of murderers, millions of rapists, millions of genocidal maniacs. Do you think that like these like Atomwaffen and like the Ku Klux Klan are not going to take advantage of the situation and are not going to go to the pacifist black people and show them what happens when you don't resist?
I think the Ku Klux Klan, I think we're using that as an example.
Wait,
I think today
wait one last second. They can just follow your advice when it comes to leaving, right? They can just go back to Africa in your model, right?
That I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Why should people have to leave the country? That's so like, no. The U.S. is a safe country. It's not a war
That's
country.
what you said about Ukrainians. You said Ukrainians should just leave. So if black people are threatened by the Klan, they should just go to Africa, right? They should just leave. They go back to Africa and leave the country, right? They
hold
should just
on,
leave.
hold on.
They should
Hold
just do what
on.
the Klan tells them to do.
I'll tell you why it's different. Because the Ukraine is under a war area. It is an area that is, being shot. It's not a safe place to be. Now, if people in the United States feel threatened and they can do this now, they have the option to do that. But no one is saying that people should. There's a big difference between saying people have the freedom and option to if they fucking want to. But I feel like 99.99% of people don't want to, because even with all the violence going on here,
that's the recommendation you're giving for Ukrainians. So because they face violence, therefore they should just run away from Ukraine. But
it's not the case with African Americans in the United States. It's
why
not the same at all.
Why do we hold Americans to different standards than we hold Ukrainians?
Because America is not a war-torn country.
It will be if we follow your pacifist principles, because then the warlords and brutes in the Klan are going to take over.
I don't think that's ever going to happen, but if it did...
Why wouldn't it? If the Ku Klux Klan, a minority, radical, extremist, white nationalist organization, knew that if they used violence, no one would resist them, why wouldn't they take up guns and say, okay, we're now going to establish a white nationalist state. We're going to send all the black people out of the country. Why wouldn't they?
Because I'll give my hot take. I feel like they can do that now, and no one's really going to do anything about it even now.
Yeah, of course people would. People would shoot them. People would kill them, rightfully.
Well, I mean, look at the far right protests. I mean, a bunch of these people
and they get beat up, they get arrested. Patriot Front got arrested at a recent protest. Under your model, maybe that shouldn't have happened because the threat of force would have needed to be used to arrest them. Do you think Patriot Front would have peacefully been arrested when they were going to attack that LGBTQ plus march if they didn't think the cops wouldn't use force against them? If they knew that the cops wouldn't use force against them, they would have beat up every queer in a 2-mile radius, man.
I don't think that people's human nature is that different. I mean, wrong.
People are violent. They are violent human beings. Just human beings are violent creatures.
Burns is
I tend to think that we're in a much more civilized society, that most people would not do that. Even the most extreme people wouldn't do that kind of stuff. Like, I think the Ku Klux Klan is very different today than what it was in the 1960s. And I think the reason for that is because of societal change, because it's not okay to be racist, not because we're going to kill the racist. People don't kill racists.
So you're saying that the Klan is reformed and they wouldn't be violent. Like, the Klan is too nice.
Well, no, hold on. What I'm saying is that there's a lot less Klan members. What I'm saying is that they have, don't misquote me on this. Maybe I misspoke, but what I'm saying is that it's a lot less powerful than it used to be. There's a lot less members.
Okay, but you're creating a scenario where that huge decrease in numbers, that less cultural influence, political influence that they have, because that is true, they splinter into huge issues, that no longer matters. Because now all they have to do is walk into any town with guns, and the pacifist residents are just going to say, well, we can't resist. I guess all of our black neighbors just need to leave.
Well, there's always going to be, here's the thing, though. Realistically speaking, there's always going to be people like Antifa who, I don't agree with Antifa, but there's always going to be people like that who are just going to respond to violence no matter what. Like, they're vigilantes. They don't care. There's going to be people like Kyle Rittenhouse. I mean, I don't like any of these people, but there's going to be people like that regardless. And I'm sure some people would be passionate enough to want to stop these people.
But not if they live by your principles.
Well, the truth of pacifism is it doesn't matter.
The thing about pacifism, it seems, is that it only works if other people aren't pacifists, and that's why it doesn't make any sense.
But hold on, what I'm saying is that the pacifists, if we don't punish people for doing bad things, if we don't use the threat of violence, that applies for anyone, regardless of who's doing the violence. I don't think things would fundamentally change all that much. I think it'd be better because people wouldn't be tortured in prisons, and people less people I think would be murdered. But I think that society would not change that drastically.
Society would be 10 times worse if everybody who listened to you decided to be pacifists. Because all it would take is just a few people not being pacifists and the whole system crumbles. Because they just don't obey the rules, and then they kill everybody else because the people can't fight back. There's a reason why all the pacifist movements historically either got completely wiped out or are very small. It's because if they ended up expanding, people would just take advantage of the fact they're pacifists and completely roll them over.
Burns is an immoral,
Yeah, I would
morally
say
corrupt,
that.
bankrupt
I
man.
forgot what I was gonna say. Fuck, why can't I remember? Yeah, there's gonna be people who obviously are gonna try to, stop the pacifists.
You're completely muffled. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. I had a response and then I just kind of forgot. Like, that sucks.
Okay, I just can I just ask you, why has pacifism never worked? Why do you think pacifism hasn't worked? Like never. Like every single time, like pacifists either all get slaughtered or like it doesn't grow. Like why does nobody want to be a pacifist?
I feel like the root of pacifism is a slow, gradual change, and I feel like we should start with prison reform. We should start with making sure the cops are less violent. I don't think it's something you can implement overnight. It's a fundamental change society you need, and I feel like we're a couple decades or a few hundred years off from making it sustainable. I feel like it is something that can work. It just needs the right society and the right culture to make it work. And maybe it starts off in small communities and then grows to where it can be sustainable in larger communities. I would, why hasn't it worked? Probably that people are kind of ignorant to the cultural stuff surrounding it, and need to understand that it's more of a process. And you can't do everything right away. But if you have the long-term goals in mind, then maybe it can work.
Okay, so so it hasn't worked, but maybe one day it will long term.
That's like saying, well, we haven't invented computers yet. In the 1800s, who say computers will ever work? I just think that it's a point
But the
in
problem
society.
is your system will only work if
if
there is no violent people, right? If no one decides to be violent. And that'd be great if no one did. But in Ukraine,
we're in the most peaceful time in human history.
It doesn't
People
feel
forget
very
this.
peaceful
The most peaceful
where
time
I'm at right now. It doesn't feel very peaceful where I'm at right now. And if you're
guess
true,
what? You're an outlier.
And if you're true, if what you're saying is true, the most peaceful time in human history, if the idea is
true.
Okay, then the idea
and
is
only get
one
more
day.
Peaceful.
Shut the fuck up. Then the idea is one day we can have pacifism, but we can't have it today because we're not all peaceful. So therefore, pacifism doesn't work right now. So telling Ukrainians to surrender is stupid.
We can take steps towards making it happen.
And taking a step is letting the people who are violent win and take over countries, and showing regimes across the world that violence works. All this does is reward violence, and if you reward violence, it just begets more violence.
I think that Russia naturally, over time, give it a few decades, it'll become a drastically more peaceful country eventually. And I think that
after what? So these countries just get to wipe out all the other countries, and then once they've done that, then they're going to be peaceful once they've taken all the stuff from everyone else and made everybody else's life a living hell, and will of course be peaceful. But it can't. Literally, the country you're making, it cannot be peaceful. It actually cannot. If it is occupying another nation state, it is inherently not peaceful, because occupation requires violence. So no, if they're occupying Ukraine, they cannot be a peaceful country. That is inherently violent, because you are using the threat of force to stop people from creating an independent state based upon their national identity.
They're not peaceful now, but I tend to believe that over time, people will start to realize that their best interests align with the best interests of society, and the best interest for everybody is eliminating violence across the board. I think that human beings are intelligent, and eventually we can understand this concept.
Can we make them realize this much quicker if we show them that invading Ukraine was a bad idea by defeating them in Ukraine, therefore driving Russia quicker to a peaceful future, because they'll know that invading countries isn't the way to go, because you'll fail and you'll lose all your sons and daughters, and it's a terrible idea.
Well, I think we need to break the cycle. People talk all the time about abuse victims. Victims of abuse wind up to abuse other people. How about we break the cycle and stop that at some point? Let's
stop it by going to the police. You stop it by going to the police and stopping the violence that way. Abuse victims don't stop violence by just submitting to their abuser.
If you treat people with kindness, They're
That's
much more
not,
likely to
no.
treat you
That's
nicer
the
than they would.
worst advice you could give to an abuse victim. Maybe if you just cook the lasagna better, then he won't shove your head into the cabinet and ram it against the wall. Like, that's not gonna work. That's not
Oh wait,
how.
it's
Stop it.
it's true. I've developed a lot of survival mechanisms for my own experiences, and I found that when you're
That's
nice to people, even
terrible.
the
That's
most
awful.
worst kinds of
Stop.
people, they treat you better. They genuinely do. People like being treated kind to you, and if you're kind to them, they'll
This
reward
is
you for it.
actually okay. Now you've crossed the line from like funny lolcow. I mean, we weren't really ever that funny. I'm gonna be honest. Now you're just fucking. I mean, the whole discussion has been stupid, but now it's getting grosser and grosser. Like you're stacking like Ukrainians should
Oh
just
no, how
accept
dare I be
their
against
submission
violence?
to people getting beaten by their wives and husbands should just accept it, and maybe one day if they're nice enough, they'll stop getting beaten. To like pacifism is
I love how this is all because I advocate for kindness. This is like, oh,
this
how dare you
no
advocate for
you
kindness,
don't. It's not
Rosalind?
that
You're
you
such an
advocate
evil
for
person.
kindness. Okay, I don't think everyone should be kind. Okay, I think it is the kind thing the Ukrainians are doing in sending the Russians back over the border. Okay, because they're stopping their imperialist ambitions now. That's a kind thing the Ukrainians are doing for them.
How are you
A kind,
being
swift
kind?
loss for the Russians is much kinder than a long, enduring occupation where they're going to have their soldiers blown up in car bombs for the next 30 years.
Hold on. First of all, I think that it's just going to make Russia even madder at Ukraine, attacking them, and it's going to want to make them more angry at Ukraine. And also, this war and Ukraine attacking back, it justifies what Russia said about Ukraine. It makes the Russian people feel justified in what they thought about them.
But
So
the
why
problem
would you give
is,
them
if they
that?
don't fight back, then they're going to feel even more justified because they're going to be like, wow, look how much they accepted our rule. Guess they really did want to be part of Russia. That's what the message is going to be. In fact, this destroyed the Russian narrative because they prepared an invasion for like 3 days. A lot of commentators like this will be over very quickly. Very quickly, and it wasn't because the Ukrainian will to be independent was stronger than the Russian will to prepare a proper invasion. And so
Wow,
that
I can't believe
destroyed
we're
the
proud of
Russian
them, but they've got
narrative.
to kill
What
the
you're
Russian people for
advocating
a
for
longer period of
would
time.
enable the Russian narrative and basically prove Russian
Yeah,
propagandists right.
it would. Here's the thing: in that scenario, Russia would treat the Ukrainians kindly versus this scenario where they
No,
treat
it
the
wouldn't.
Ukrainians
They'd
fairly
still kill.
violently.
What did they
It's a
treat the
better
Tartars
scenario.
in Crimea kindly when they ended up dead in rivers? They wouldn't treat them kindly. They'd still kill the political opponents. They'd still suppress the freedom of information and freedom of press and freedom of protest. They'd still arrest people who objected to their rule. They'd arrest those who gave a different interpretation of Ukrainian history than what was the Russian state abused of Persian. They would still have the anti-LGBTQ plus policies that they have in the Russian state. They would still have terrible policies towards women and minority. Like it would still be awful. They would not treat them
Yeah, I mean,
kindly.
Russia has its flaws. It has a lot of flaws. I think it's a country with a lot of problems that needs to be fixed. But I think that will happen eventually over time. I don't think you can force it. And when you try to rush it too quickly with a war that kills people, the ends don't justify the means.
Can you tell me a single time that we've had a societal change towards a better future just across the board without any violence at all or the threat of violence?
Did women cause violence to get the right to vote in the United States? Did the
Feminists
LGBT
did get violent. There were violent protests, absolutely. And there
which
was the
only
threat
hurt
of
their
violence from women too.
that?
Yes, absolutely.
Did LGBT people threaten violence to legalize gay marriage?
Stonewall was like the start of the modern LGBTQ plus movement. It was
Which
a riot.
was decades before and did not lead to
It helped birth the LGBTQ plus movement, which ended up birthing like a million different advancements for queer people. Absolutely. Like there was violence in queer activism, and you can't say that the threat of violence from queer people didn't benefit them at all, because queer people defending themselves led to a lot of queer people not being killed. Like if homophobes knew that if you kill a gay person they won't resist, then they're just going to go kill all the major gay activists, and you're going to have a million Harvey Milks, not just one Harvey Milk.
I don't believe that there's a ton of
There were
people like that. I
suffragette
think
bombings for God. Whatever. Okay, continue.
I don't like the guy, the homophobic preacher from Texas or whatever. Like the fact that that was newsworthy should prove to you, like all these freaking school shootings and stuff, they're so rare that they're newsworthy that you hear about all of them. The same thing happens with all these like terrible, evil, like homophobic, racist, like people. It's like if it were such a problem, then it wouldn't be making the news. This is a problem. The news only reports the worst stuff because that's what makes them money. When it's like we're living in a time of peace, we're
Really?
living in a
Okay.
great time. And it's
So
like people just
if let's say World War
distorts the
II
view.
was constantly in the news, does that mean we're living in a time of peace?
Well, no, that wasn't a time of peace. The problem is that the media will treat every time like a time of non-peace because a time of peace doesn't sell. So they, like CNN, Fox News, and all those people want to tell their audience that the worst is happening. Society's about to collapse for different reasons, depending on the political leaning of the audience. But there's not like, oh, today is a great day. We're living in the peaceful time ever. Like that's not going to get a lot of viewers. But saying,
Okay, can
look
you
at the
tell me
war in Ukraine.
tell me the time in history where we had more school shootings than we have now, if we're living in a time of peace when it comes to school shootings?
Okay, so when you look at the specific issue of school shootings, we are in the deadliest time.
But you
is
just
true.
said that they were reporting on school shootings more because they're so rare now because we're living in a time of peace.
on.
But we're having the most school shootings ever.
Well, first of all, I believe that the school shootings is a problem with the media keeping reporting it, encouraging more shooters because they know they'll get a bunch of attention for doing these awful things. But the issue is school shootings account for such a small percentage of shootings in America. It's like it's not even worth talking about. The vast majority of shootings in America are done by young black men to other young black men. It's not all the case. Like there's violence across the board, but if you look at a lot of like where the violence is, that tends to be it. It's a lot of lower income communities who don't have access to things. Their lives suck. And we see that when people's, conditions improve, that they tend to become less violent.
I think you
feel
should
like
be the
that's the
one
issue.
person the vote should not be allocated for. I think you're like I found the one person that makes me like believe democracy shouldn't be for everyone.
You don't think I should have the right to vote?
No, I don't.
Even though
I don't believe you should have the right to vote.
Here's that's like really weird, but okay, whatever. The thing is,
Hey, if I go to you and I threaten you, if you're gonna go to the voting booth, you can't stop me. If I go and stop you from voting, you can't call the cops. So you no longer have the right to vote. Sorry.
If someone's going to threaten me with violence to stop voting, there's probably going to be cops on scene. But if there's not, I just probably go home and be safe. I don't. But I do plan on voting. I'd probably do a mail-in voting.
Could you imagine if Martin Luther King was like, I have a dream, but if anyone, says I'll punch you, I'll give up on it. Sorry, I'm going home. Good, have a nice day, Mr. White Man.
Well, I think with like the African American like stuff, when they're being peaceful, it actually is probably better for them because when people, and it's awful because racism fucking sucks. But the problem is when a black person's violent, like all these news outlets are gonna like hone in on that, being like, oh no, this black person's, and a bunch of racist people are gonna take that and run with it. So if people become less violent, they get less of that, and I think it's better for them. And as a trans woman, I feel the same way. There's a lot of
it's not that simple. I think that activist movements need a combination of peaceful protests, but the threat of violence should be active in every movement to defend itself, or the movement will just simply be stamped out.
That's so stupid. Like
no, name one movement that completely succeeded with zero threats of violence.
Like I feel like
answer the question. Name a single movement ever that completely succeeded with no threats of violence.
I feel like I already answered this question though, and you just disagreed with me.
Which you said the suffragette movement. There was bombings, for fuck's sake. Like that's not true.
Well, the LGBT stuff. Like I say, a trans woman.
Stonewall. They beat that started. That's like the thing that launched the LGBT movement. Like this is like well known. Like
That's so stupid. Like, you're gonna point to the absolute worst aspect.
What do you mean the worst aspect? It is this would be like saying the Civil War, like when it comes to like, it does not count when it comes to ending slavery. Like Stonewall was like a launching big moment when it comes to LGBT activism, where gay people got together and forcefully stopped the cops from arresting people for wearing the improper clothes. And it was a big moment. And you want to know what? The cops eventually stopped arresting people for wearing the improper clothes that did not align with their gender. It was a big moment.
I think that when it comes to the Civil War, we could have ended slavery in a more peaceful way, and I think it was the deadliest war in American history.
Okay, how did you go to the slave owners who forcefully chatteled all these people? How are you going to go to them and make them peacefully give up the slaves? How does it work?
So, first of all, you have to consider that slavery was becoming increasingly unpopular, and it would be more unpopular overall. So the slave owners were actually only rich people, right? The vast majority of the population did not own slaves. It was only rich people who had access to a lot of money and had access to these large plantains. So, the idea is eventually the people in the South would realize the human rights thing, and there wouldn't be a ton of people left to vote to protect that. So I feel like eventually
Wait, did you just say vote?
There would be enough societal pressure against slavery that there would just be a law against it, and the slave owners would not be happy, but they wouldn't result in violence, so to say.
So, to be clear,
we don't know.
if your idea is you're going to vote slavery away, now let's say somehow, even though I don't believe this would be the case, let's say somehow that succeeded. So then how do you stop? Okay, you just ended slavery by vote. You just voted slavery to be illegal. How do you now remove the enslaved people from the properties of slave owners, who again have armed guards? How do you do that?
I mean, obviously you would have people come over and try to do that. And
I have a gun. I'm keeping my slaves. Your move.
We're just having the same argument that we had before.
Yeah, exactly. This is why it's the same thing. Every time you're going to try to enforce this move in society, if they have a gun, we lose. This is stupid. But if we have more guns than them and say, back down, boom, they're gone.
I'll tell you what. I'll think of it this way. I don't know if you know about the situation like SeaWorld and all these other places. What's happening is that we've decided that homing orcas and stuff is actually very immoral. So what they've done is they've prevented the sale of new orcas, but the orcas that are still there can still stay. So what's going to happen is that they're basically making sure that the ones they have live as long as possible, but they know they can't get any in the future. That could be a
so what you're saying is basically we
either.
end slavery by just saying, okay, the people who are slaves now, they have to stay slaves, but no more slaves.
Well, I mean, the idea would be you want to turn them over, but if they're going to just result in like shooting people, then maybe you have to like find a way to be like, okay, we have to end this peacefully, and maybe this is the only way we can.
To be clear, I don't believe that you have to end it peacefully, because violence is still occurring. When a black woman, a black slave is raped, that's violent. When a black man is whipped, okay, that's violent, right?
Slavery
so all this violence,
is awful.
slavery, yeah, slavery's awful, but you're allowing the violence to take place because you don't want to be violent to end it.
Well, hold on. No, because what's happening
I
is
have
the number
actual
of people...
Ukrainians in my chat who are like, what is going on right now? So I actually feel embarrassed to present you to them, like that I'm talking to you like a serious person. So we should probably end the conversation.
Well, the number of people who died in the Civil War was insanely high, more than any other war, more than World War I, more than World War II. That is a catastrophe, and that way too many people are dismissive and are okay with that. And I just don't think that we should allow that many people to have died like that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but your solution is you leave people in slavery. That is your solution.
Which is awful. But when we look at the pure numbers of the situation, it'd be a lot less people would die.
A lot more people were liberated from slavery than the amount of people that died.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I think slavery would end either way. It would just take a little bit longer.
But it would take generations of people being raped, beaten, and having their labor stolen.
I don't think it'd be generations.
It would be generations. When do you think the South would be like, okay, we now vote to end slavery? Like, what big movement would have caused that in the South? Honestly, I think the only thing that would have done it maybe would have been like a slave revolt in the immediate future. Right, which would have been violent. You would tell them not to revolt. You would look at the Haitians.
I mean, it's better than the Civil War, so sure, yeah. If the slaves revolted, it'd be better than the Civil War. Yeah, though. It'd be better than the Civil War. So
But you would still tell them stop because it's violent.
At that point, and when they're slaves, I feel like they have at least some right to do that.
But the Ukrainians don't have a right to fight back.
I mean, I don't. I think it's different. They're not being treated as slaves.
This is silly. This is so silly.
I think it's offensive to slaves to compare the Ukrainians to slaves.
You think I'm being offensive to slaves right now?
I mean, I'm sure people think that I am too. I expect that. I know that. I know that people are always going to have an issue with me.
It's whatever. But you deserve it, though.
I mean, that's your opinion. I'm sure
it's everyone's opinion. I don't think there's anybody who's watching right now who believes that you don't deserve the scrutiny and problems that you're getting from the statements you say.
I would say that I just think that people should be nicer and more civilized and just anti-cancel culture. I think cancel culture is toxic and evil. I think people should be allowed.
Do you think Russia's being canceled?
I think that businesses like fucking McDonald's not being in Russia is really fucking stupid. All you're gonna do is give more money to Russian government. All you're doing is giving more money to Russian-owned businesses.
No, that's you don't. Oh God, I cannot talk to you about economics too. No, this is the worst person in the world to talk to economics about.
Because instead of an American company getting,
I can hear you smiling. You're not serious.
Why do you think I'm not serious?
There's no way you're serious.
But I am.
I just don't believe you.
But I am. What the fuck? Just because my opinion is different from yours, you think I'm joking?
I think your opinion's so fucking stupid and backwards that you're joking.
Well, we can be nice about this. I don't think that.
I'm not going to be nice about it because what you're saying is not nice. Because what you're saying about Ukraine and slavery is not nice.
How is that nice? That's all I advocated for.
Telling Ukraine to submit to a foreign invader, that's not nice. Most Ukrainians are going to look at what you're saying and saying, fuck you, I don't like you.
Why is calling me stupid for wanting peace?
Because it's correct. I'm right. Come on.
That's so stupid. There's no such thing as a morally correct opinion.
No, but I do. There's not okay. But there is such thing as a stupid opinion, which you've had multiple today.
You can't. That is just your opinion. You cannot.
Okay, well, my opinion is that your opinion is fucking stupid. I'm sorry, but I don't believe you're serious. I believe you are. You're an attention whore, and this is how you get attention, and this is how you do it. Because I refuse to believe that this is your actual opinion. This is fucking ridiculous.
But it is my opinion. I can be an attention whore, and this can be my genuine opinion too, right? Those things can both be true at once.
Those things can be true at once, and that would make you the worst person. I actually kind of hope you're faking it, because if it's true that you're both an attention whore and this is your real opinion, that is the worst case scenario.
That is the worst case scenario. I don't tend to think I'm particularly unique. I think the law of statistics would say that most people are average, so I'm probably pretty average. I don't think that I'm particularly special, Hello?
I'm still here. I don't know what else to say to you. We went through the ringer today. So anyway, I hope be hopeful that your address never I don't know, gets found by the local burglars club, because then if they find this YouTube video or this stream VOD, you're screwed, man.
I don't necessarily feel comfortable with you bringing that up. I feel like you're kind of encouraging that to happen.
I'm not encouraging it to happen. I'm saying I want you to be as consistent.
By you bringing it up in this conversation, I feel like you're encouraging people to do that, which puts me in danger. I don't like that.
If I bring up the fact that your moral system means that anyone can mug you, it's your fault for having such a bad moral system.
If something happens over these next few days because of this conversation,
something happens, I probably I don't know if I'll laugh, but I'm not gonna be that torn up about it. I'm gonna be honest. Because if you get mugged after you tell all of Ukraine to stop resisting, never use violence, and then you reap what you sow when it comes to your own moral system, I'm not gonna be crying that much. If my moral system was I need to eat feces and then I catch E. coli, nobody is gonna be like, wow, Dylan, I feel so bad for you. No, I decided to eat feces. It's my fault.
Yeah, well, I just think that that's really irresponsible that you would just be like, encouraging people, maybe not explicitly, but like if something happens for you, you're not even going to feel at least
Nobody
somewhat
should
sorry
mug
about
you,
it.
but your system is setting you up to be mugged. Like I'm not gonna feel bad
But I
if
feel
you
like
get
when you
mugged
put
after
emphasis
you
on it and
publicly
you
say,
encourage
I will
people,
never
like,
ever use violence, I'll never call the police, I'll never do this thing, and then you advocate for other people to do it, like a nation currently having their people slaughtered and killed and bombed, and I mean, this is silly. You'd say the people on D-Day, the good guys fighting the Nazis, they're just as bad as the other fucking army. Like this is silly, and this is why I wouldn't feel bad, is because you're creating a world where of course this type of thing could happen to you, because you've created your own issue, you've created your own lack of security in your own home.
You're okay that bad things happen to me because we have disagreements, like politically. That's like so bad. That's basically what you're saying right now.
I didn't say it's okay if bad things happen to you. I just say I wouldn't care.
I mean, that's like kind of like the same. I mean, I guess there's like a slight difference there, but like, I don't know. It's kind of makes you feel weird, but whatever.
I'm just saying that if I had a moral system where I had to sit down and I'm like, morally I need to eat feces, and I'm just going nom, 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 all day, then I catch E. coli, would you be like, Dylan, I feel so bad for you because you caught E. coli? No, you'd look at me and you'd be like, Dylan, of course you caught E. coli. You ate feces all day. That's stupid.
Dude,
this is your fault.
That's fundamentally different from me being online. I feel like I have my.
If you have a moral system where you're publicly saying, for whatever reason, like, I will never use violence. Violence is bad. I will not call the police. If somebody storms into my home like a Mongol and takes all my stuff, I'll do nothing. Like, I mean, come on.
Like, come on. That's just not cool. Like,
I don't care if it's not cool. You should have a smarter moral system.
It's genuinely making me feel uncomfortable. Like at this point, like,
then
like
leave,
I'm sorry.
All right. But look out for the Mongol Khan, okay? Boy, they're gonna come in horseback.
Oh my god. Yeah. Well, that was a conversation.
Yeah, it certainly was. But I mean, like, again, like, I'm in Ukraine watching Ukrainians die fighting for their liberty, and you're just saying it's morally wrong for them to shoot back at the Russians, and then you're asking for my sympathy when I say your moral system would lead to you being mugged and you can't do anything about it, and you're like,
but
I'm
advocating for less people to die in a war. That's the thing. We disagree about like what should be done, but I want less people to die in a war. Like I would assume you want people to not die in a war.
I think I and many Ukrainians are willing to put their own lives at risk if it means they get to live a free future, because a life without freedom isn't really worth living.
Just go to another country if that really bothers you.
It's but not whatever. That simple, because you have generations of people who live here. They've worked these lands for generations. They want to live here. They've got all their finances here. They've got the homes they built here. They've got the lives they built here.
There's bombs being dropped on their homes. Why would you want to stay there? That's dumb. Just move.
Just move.
But whatever.
Okay, that if somebody goes and robs your house, if they find your address, then just move. Just move, Rose.
Oh my god.
Wow, it's really offensive that after I tell Ukrainians to just move from a war, you would say just move from my home if I get mugged. That's really offensive, Dylan, and I can't believe you would say that.
Oh my. I feel like you're... I don't even feel comfortable with this conversation anymore. I just
feel uncomfortable. I don't care.
What even was this?
I don't know, Rose, but I thought you may have learned from last time. But I was very wrong.
I thought we were gonna have like a nice conversation. I thought we were gonna be cool. But
you can't say we should just let the slaves die off.
We can have political disagreements and still be cool with each other. Like,
no,
you know what
not
I'm
if
saying?
your political disagreement is so stupid it leads to all of my friends dying or losing everything.
I want less people to die.
They still lose everything, okay? They still lose everything, and people still die, Rose. People still get executed.
Whatever. I'm just gonna go.
Okay, goodbye, Rose. Look out for the
Bye.
Mongols. I disconnected her. I wasn't done.